Hiya! Welcome to this, my 28th installment of VideoFuzzy, titled Closer and Closer and Closer. I'm your host, Terry J. Aman, and in this installment, I explore a bit of a departure for the series The Closer. I examine a somewhat troubling segment from the Mind of Mencia, a list of video game names generated by artificial intelligence from Adult Swim, and a beat poetry celebration of the series premiere of Pose on FX. Welcome to the show. He doesn't have that on video, does he? We'll find out together on VideoFuzzy. This week I broke through disc 500 in my classic collection. That's my VHS to DVD transfer collection, which, as of that point, I continued to bring in at 2 hours per disc. That portion of my homemade DVD collection still runs through disc 2570, so I've absolutely still got a good long ways to go. But it's fun to see some progress happening as well. I also wanted to mention another milestone I'm coming up on. VideoFuzzy went live June 19th, 2017, so as of next week, this production has been up and running for a year, which I'll be celebrating with a special episode set to come out on June 24th. Any feedback, well wishes, anything anyone would like to be a part of that, you can send notes, audio, or video files to tjaman1970@yahoo.com. I can work with anything, or message me through VideoFuzzy's Facebook page. Thanks.
Friday Night Feature.
On disc 502, I encountered an unusual episode from the second season of The Closer on TNT called Heroic Measures. Interspersed with the frames of the opening credits, Lieutenant Daniels and Sergeant Gabriel arrive at a hospital in response to a 911 call. They arrive together in that they were on a date. They do not arrive at the crime scene together, however, through a disagreement over the best way to get to the third floor. Lieutenant Daniels gets there first and finds a mother in hysterics over the death of her teenage son, claiming the surgeons murdered him. Daniels tries to comfort her as the hospital administrator tells Daniels there's been a tragic death, but no murder, and she should just go home. Daniels tells him you do not just tell the LAPD they can just go home, and shuts down the operating room as a crime scene as Sergeant Gabriel joins the scene. Then Priority Homicide Division Deputy Chief Brenda Lee Johnson and her date, FBI investigator Fritz Howard, arrive dressed to the nines from some outrageously dull awards ceremony. The hospital administrator, Howard Pierce, addresses Fritz, asking if he's in charge. Fritz stares at him and then says, "Talk to the lady." This was one of several instances of overt sexism that a public relations-minded professional like a hospital administrator could be expected to avoid, but he's not at the top of his game this evening because a couple of his surgeons committed surgery on a now-dead young boy. They are frantically cobbling multiple conflicting stories together, and the mom, Melissa Langner, a fourth-year resident, isn't buying any of them. So the priority homicide investigation ensues, and despite a number of unusual developments, it's shaping up to be a standard malpractice case with a couple of extenuating weirdnesses, including one of the surgeons miming the stitching of a gastric artery for the OR cameras rather than actually doing so. Attending said it was a judgment call he'd made and would make again, despite first claiming he'd taken heroic measures, done everything he could, and then he blamed the non-effectiveness of the non-surgery on everything else, including Melissa for Munchausen by proxy, as well as the other surgeon for his incompetence. Chief Johnson confronted him about this, saying if his records and actions were borne out in good faith, why try to implicate the grieving mother? By this point, however, the assistant DA has weighed in, saying that even with the footage of the fake surgery, there's no way to convict on a homicide charge, and Brenda's boss, Will Pope, has already assigned her team to help Commander Taylor in robbery homicide with what's shaping up to be a serial killer. On their way to that case, Johnson's deeply conflicted, having chased down and gotten to the proof in Daniel's case, having identified actually criminal negligence. She's not able to bring it across the finish line. Daniels gets it. They did the best they could, but the system is the system. When a shot rings out, then another. Multiple shots fired in a parking garage. They come around the corner and see that Melissa has executed the two surgeons responsible for her son's death. She turns and says, "It should be easy to get your conviction in this one, Chief." Dark. From the pilot episode of The Closer in 2005, I have been entranced with Kira Sedgwick's creation of LA Police Department Priority Homicide Division Deputy Chief Brenda Lee Johnson, initially called the Priority Murder Squad until someone noticed the initials. The Closer, created by executive producer James Duff, plunks the steeliest Magnolia Southern Belle Brenda Lee Johnson of Atlanta, Georgia, thank you, down to the testosterone-drenched misogyny of the LAPD. Even in putting her own team together, she had just one other woman on the squad, Lieutenant Daniels, and she only lasted a couple of seasons. In pursuing this case, it would be easy to argue they're overreacting based on personality conflicts. The hospital administrator is a jerk, but he's an equal opportunity jerk. He's a jerk to everyone, including Chief Pope, and that ends up working not well for him. Reorganizing this episode, if he'd acted with diplomacy and deference, Lieutenant Daniels likely would have concluded that it was malpractice, not homicide, and Miss Langner could pursue the civil avenues he suggested for recourse. But in that he was obnoxious at every level, officers good and true made it a priority. So yeah, one unusual aspect is that this was not a case that they'd be called in on. Daniels and Gabriel were responding to a 911 dispatch issued because Miss Langner was out of hand. The surgeons were skeevy and arrogant, cold and unfeeling, and what was weird was they maintained their cold and inhuman take on this instance. I mean, for Christ's sakes, a woman has lost her child within a year of losing her husband, you arrogant prick. Where's that compassion training you're all supposed to have? So, yeah, that came through a little cold. Now, plus, yeah, they couldn't keep their story straight, so what's she supposed to think? I mean, it's not like she's just some random mom you can bamboozle with medical jargon. She's a resident. But she'd also know what Munchausen by proxy looked like, so she wouldn't be offended when you asked her about it. She'd offer her explanation. Mostly this episode was written to highlight and counter institutional sexism. I mean, women might in fact get emotional, just as men do occasionally, but that doesn't make them unreliable. The implications are insulting. The investigators treated a grieving mother with respect. They asked the right questions and followed up the leads that emerged, including a few that put her in a bad light, despite the case ultimately being neither a priority nor a homicide. Well, not until the end, anyway. Clear-eyed refusal to dismiss a tragic death out of hand. If there was criminal negligence, they were going to find it, and they did find a doctor guilty of fatal arrogance. The law offered her no recourse, so Melissa Langner became vengeance, adding, "You know, I think Dr. Woods thought he was God," she said. Turns out he was wrong. It was an unusual outcome for this show. Usually Brenda's probing inquiries result in the combination of evidence and testimony they need to put a case in front of a jury, and the understanding we're left with is that the trials result in guilty verdicts. It's rare that Johnson and her team puts together an evidence-based and corroborated confession, and the DA's reaction to that is, so what, I'll never get a jury to convict, so who cares? What an episode like this does is illustrate Brenda's heart, her rage at the gap between righteousness and justice. You get the sense that most of the time a seasoned veteran of the prosecutorial system has just got to accept that there's going to be cases like this, but it's good to see that she's still more idealistic than pragmatic, more hopeful than cynical, and invested rather than resigned. Always enjoyed this series, one of the few procedurals I ever invested much time on. I didn't follow it when it became major crimes, not because of Mary McDonnell or anything against her, certainly not, or her hardball character Sharon Rader. I'm sure she was a fine addition, but because 7 seasons long I'd pretty much seen it, I guess, and after moving to Bismarck the show fell pretty firmly off my radar. But I always loved Kira Sedgwick and her inventive take on this complicated character who seemed to find the right balance to running her department and achieving the results she needed to, the instinct asking the right questions to get the information she needed, and just the combination of smart writing and smart presentation in telling these stories, which I always thought they did a very good job.
Diving into the classic collection.
This set of discs I was burning through with an eye towards achieving my 500 disc milestone, so I didn't spend a lot of time with much of the media as it whipped on by, though it may be fortuitous that the structure split this segment from Carlos Mencia's Mind of Mencia across discs 495 and 496. The Royal Religious Rumble, featuring WWE World Wrestling Entertainment star Edge commenting, along with Mencia, on a battle royale among Shiva, Buddha, and Invisible Muhammad, and Jesus defeating them by turning the ring into water and walking upon it, then Moses parting it, but defeated when Christ distracted him with a sail. Then surprise referee Tom Cruise vanquished Christ, and Carlos Mencia and Edge joined forces to defeat Scientology. Thus winning the day, Mencia proclaims the central tenet of his new world religion is no one is allowed to take a life in the name of his religion, which, wow, seems obvious, but yeah, sometimes it'd be nice for current world faiths to reassert that from time to time. So, fun and frivolous as that segment was, in the same episode, comedian Carlos Mencia released a music video built around his catchphrase, "Dee-da-dee," which, yes, during his act, when it's not in a music video and he has a chance to lay in a little context, he makes it perfectly clear that he is talking about actually stupid people, not people struggling with developmental disabilities. And most of the examples he cites in his song bear this out. Oh, you dropped out of school because you're smarter than everybody, or you ignore all the warnings yet you light up that smoke, or your ass is too fat to get out of the house, or you're eating more food, try to figure it out. And he lists consequences like, okay, so you're complaining about gas prices and the war in Iraq, but you voted for W twice. Or, well, you dropped out of school, so you're stuck in low-skilled, low-wage jobs. Or you drove drunk, so your ass is in jail. I enjoyed the bridge. This test is too hard, so they lowered the standards. I'm not good at sports, so they gave them all trophies. My dad used to spank me, so they lowered the standards. I'm too fat for this seat, so they widened the standards. They say no because I'm black, so they lowered the standards. They say no because I'm white, so they lowered the standards. They say no because I'm Asian, so they lowered the standards. No habla inglés y cambiamos the standards. Though that, cambiamos, reads like we lowered the standards. If they lowered the standards, or as it reads here, they changed the standards, it would be cambiaron los estándares. Am I seriously correcting Carlos Mencia's Spanish, armed with my 30-year-old high school Spanish and Google Translate? I forgot how to effing pronounce homicidio a few segments back. Which, I will point out, I was only reminded by the production credits of an episode of Ugly Betty, which included Silent H Productions, so that was about as random a heads up as it could possibly be, without which that Psych episode title would remain entirely uncorrected in this project, so absolutely withdrawn. Most of the time comes to Spanish, I'm the D. The song blames parents for not disciplining their kids, which I see in other contexts and other memes. Got involved in a comment clash recently when I suggested that parents' fears of spanking their kids is not the primary reason behind school shootings. Other people are certain that it is. For getting involved in that comment war, and one with a flat earther more recently, I will own that I am the D. Not that I'm necessarily right or wrong, my pig-headed globist fantasy to the side for the moment. How could I possibly know to what extent a lapse in parental discipline and oversight is responsible for all of the school shootings we've been experiencing lately, but rather for engaging in the comment war in the first place. For as we all know, there are people in this world called trolls who exist online specifically to pick and perpetuate fights in comment threads about vaccination and politics and 9/11 and the earth is flat and the Holocaust never happened and we were never on the moon and on and on and on and on. And they're never wrong, never will be wrong. They have marshaled endless links and sources and walls of text supporting their ridiculous points of view. They must not be fed. As I learned a long time ago in the 1983 Matthew Broderick film War Games, the only winning move is not to play. Do not engage, do not feed the troll. I fed the troll. Dee. Or, as other comedy singers have put it less offensively, here's my sign. See, the point at which the song breaks down from this is the chorus, where the stupid people should not get married because then their kids will be dee, which, yeah, I know what you said up top there, but as the song continues, dee, as Mice and Men Lenny-esque characterization is repeated, dee, it's harder to distinguish from merely stupid or ignorant to the more bullying end of the spectrum, and that word is used advisedly. It's just a song. Carlos Mencia is just a comedian, one who has largely vanished from the cultural landscape in the wake of accusations of plagiarism and what seemed to me like jaw-dropping racism, which, I'll leave that to the show bookers and the audience and his fellow comedians to determine. Myself, I talk about plagiarism. I've got a segment coming up lifted whole cloth from a show bumper on Adult Swim. One significant difference is that I will be citing my sources on that, and I'll just say here, whenever I relate material I've encountered in the media I consume and among my commentary thereon, I do want to try to credit that. My comments here on this 3-minute song from 12 years ago have wandered all over the place, in part because I'm genuinely conflicted about the discovery of this media in my collection. I'll say that my inclusion of media isn't always because I was such a fan. I record things sometimes so as to have a record of it, and sometimes to make fun of it. And I do record some things that later I feel weren't such great things to record, that MSNBC production of the Gospel of Judas could have been not recorded, for instance, and I wouldn't have been out much. But people's sense and taste in comedy and celebrity changes over time and circumstances as well. I mentioned my disconnect on the crowd's love of Chris Brown in the 2006 MTV Video Music Awards. Bill Cosby was welcomed enthusiastically to the Norse Kustfest in Minot a few years ago. His bookings have rather fallen off a bit since then. And not piling on, basically people make their choices and face their consequences. For instance, Gilbert Gottfried could have decided not to tweet funnies about an earthquake and tsunami disaster in Japan that, per Wikipedia, caused hundreds of billions of dollars worth of damage and killed or injured more than 22,000 people, with more than 2,500 went missing. I mean, that's terrifying. I think in this case, back when it aired in 2006, I mostly found the song to be funny. Tracking back through my collection, I find a small number of segments recorded from Comedy Central's Mind of Mencia, and generally I did think he was funny, had a funny take on things sufficient to host a primetime sketch comedy production on basic cable, or at least, I guess, a presentably funny repackaging of other people's material, and I guess Viacom agreed. Hindsight? Political correctness? The middle of the 28th installment of this project, I'll point to it. I hear politically correct. I ought to replace that with treating people with respect. People will dismiss topics and reactions to things as being overly sensitive, and my response is, I don't know. I've got no idea what other people are going through, what they're struggling with, and you could draw examples from this very episode to rip me as insensitive, but I do try to tread lightly, correct myself where I should, and yeah, if you're hearing politically correct, screw that. I'm just trying to give people the base level of respect I ought to as a fellow human being. Call me out where I fall, but yeah, on reflection, explain it away however you like, but punches down. My opinion of Carlos Mencia, also influenced by what I've heard and learned since then, and hesitant to launch into a Dana Carvey-inspired superiority dance. Were I to encounter it today, yeah, I'd probably look at it a lot harder, absolutely. What else? This collection seems to have included quite a few productions from USA and Sci-Fi, with episodes of Monk, Psych, The 4400, Eureka, and Battlestar Galactica, with FX represented by episodes of Rescue Me and The Shield. Specifically, the 4th season premiere of The Shield turned up adding Glenn Close to the cast, replacing Aceveda, which, seriously, I'd forgotten her involvement in this series. From what I saw, there was dark energy swirling between her Captain Monica Rowling character and Michael Chiklis as Vic Mackey, fierce simmering after his dust-up with Walton Goggins, Shane Vendrell in the Season 3 finale, so I'm guessing they explored that some as the season continued. Finally, it's good wacky fun by I encountered a delightful commercial for Fanta featuring the Fantanas singing about Fanta Fever on Disc 501. Wild and so much going on throughout that, including the Fantanas airlifted to a rooftop party, rappelling from a chopper, singing and smiling, so yeah, it's a brightly colored, eye-catching, high-energy salesmanship there.
Current collection.
I mentioned I had another spate of plagiarism planned for this episode, and here it is. This one dates from a listing I encountered while Ralph and I were watching something on Adult Swim. In a bumper, a lead-in and lead-out between programming and commercials that Adult Swim uses joyously and comes across as direct conversational engagement with their audience, they said, "The names of 1,200 video games were fed into an AI neural network to see how well it could name video games. The result? Some fictional game titles we'd seriously like to play." They included Shartwards, Dong Devon, The Dead Charter 2, Krant Sons, The Game Park 2, The Bank, Call Heroes, The World Kent, Elite of Wars, The Tome Corps, The Gold of Dior, The Tale of the Gare 2, The Gaining 2, The Battle Evil Heroes, Dank Super Date, Sparrow Edition, Rayloy Legend, Dank, Saber 2, Dank Gain Edition, Call of the Martyr 2, The Warling, The Talk of the Senningang, Songers of Stair 2, Glompers the Fantair 2, The Bomberms of Warshorker, and Totod of the Legenders, Starner Karsing. The names were listed in a March 21 blog entry to Kotaku, which I've never heard of, but appears to be part of a blog ring that includes blogs I have heard of, including the AV Club and Deadspin. Staff writer Gita Jackson posted that she was responsible for this burst of artificially intelligent creativity, with an assist from Tim Burke of Deadspin, feeding 1,200 English-language video game titles into a neural network and commenting on the results. The blog entry and the methodology is actually kind of cool, so I'll link to it in my show notes. Check it out if you get a chance. Also, I encountered a performance by Bishop Briggs on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, a song that is just giving me life right now, this White Flag from her LP release Church of Scars. This intense, powerful singer jumping around the stage with smoke, fire, it's all going up. Don't you know I ain't afraid to shed a little blood? Smoke, fire, flares are going up, flares are going up. Oh, won't wave my white flag, no. This time I won't let go. I'd rather die than give it the fight, give it the fight, give it the fight, give it the fight. Oh, won't wave my white flag, no. I won't go down slow. I'd rather die than give it the fight, give it the fight, give it the fight, give it the fight. Damn, that thing is better than my morning coffee. Awesome song, awesome performance. So glad to have seen it. Finally, for this section, I found that I had actually encountered some of those X-Files episodes listed on TV.com that I thought I'd missed, so I did get to experience them as part of Consensus Reality. Not that RM9SBG93OMG LMFAO thing, but a chunk of them, like Familiar and Nothing Lasts Forever, and actually I did see My Struggle 4, which was billed as the finale, but might not have been, but as I said last time, it was for me. As Joss Whedon once described a DVD release of Serenity, there are multiple endings, depending on when you hit the stop button. And so I have.
What I've been watching.
The FX premiere of Pose. It's going to be hard to adequately represent the attitude, the atmosphere, the universe inhabited by the show without actually invoking beat poetry, so here goes. With a smash and 1,000 shards of glass, FX sent a flounce of drag queens swanning down the gritty catwalks of 1987 in Pose, propped up in freshly filched finery from a museum display of royal grandeur, genuine, stately, courtly couture, resplendent panic inspired by Dominic Jackson as Mother Electra of the House of Abundance, inspired by way of MJ Rodriguez as Blanca, a lady tired of waiting in Mother's shade, tired of being ignored, belittled for being unpretty, dismissed and disrespected. Sweet Blanca's got her own dreams, and per her HIV results, her clock is tick-tick-ticking, so strikes out on her own, finds her own space to build her own house, and is instantly smacked down by Electra Mommy Dearest. How dare you try to leave this group? I open my home to you. You owe me. I own you. Blanca is having none of this, and her resolve draws in one of her house sisters, India Moore as Angel, who has ambitions beyond the ballroom, and a young man, homeless and alone, disowned, kicked to the streets at the age of 17 by his blue-collar parents, Ryan Jamal Swain as Damon, who dreams of making it as a dancer, but needs the love and support of the house. As Blanca defines it, a family of his own choosing, dancing his dream as a member of this house, Blanca's house, the house of Evangelista. With the strict tough love of Billy Porter as Father Pray Tell, who lays in the baseline of this show, Pray Tell throws the balls, sets the theme, and judges more truly and harshly than any sideline queen. Blanca will have to work hard to maintain her new house, and also balance the sway of another new influence in Angel's life, a young businessman, Evan Peters as Stan Bowes, who keeps one foot on the straight and narrow but the other in the gutter, seeking a walk on the wilder side to balance his hearth and home, torn between lust and greed and power, and for a love that dare not speak its name. Ryan Murphy's Pose has outlined a story with potential a story for the ages, but I caution a sprawling, spiraling, ambitious, perhaps too ambitious a story with it's impossible to ignore here. The stakes seem low, though they catwalks through the valley of the shadow of age. The fear they face, that of being cast down, cast out from the presence of this joy, this world of high fashion, high drama, heists, crimes, and misdemeanors along the liquid eyeliner lines of the dastardly dashers from Divine's female troll. Really, were they brought down so low? Were the House of Abundance to vanquish Shea Evangelista and banish them to outer darkness? Surely there's another drag club up the block someplace. I mean, this was New York in the 80s. Madonna, Sandra Bernhardt, and Bette Midler had been things for years at this point. In the drag world envisioned by Pose, if a house challenges another to the death, the implication is that the losing house must disband. But based on what? A house is a house. You'll all still go home. You'll all still go home together, and you will all still be you. They have no power you do not give them. In American Crime Story, the assassination of Gianni Versace, and now in Pose, Murph has drawn back the curtain somewhat on the private lives of gays, but at the time, shows like My So-Called Life were illustrating what was happening to gay teens, disowned, dispossessed, homeless, scared, in need of help. The precarious plight of young gays has been known and shown for decades now, and as suicide once again ascends to higher profile, a reminder that young gays have been disproportionately suicidal since they've kept records. It's cool that this show illustrates what they have to put up with from their families, with society. Actually, I'll just leave it at that. It's a story we've heard, Murph, but you just keep telling it. You tell it well. Happy Pride Month, June. Strike a pose. What else? Samantha Bee took more than a few minutes this past week to react to the president's calling for her show, her half-hour weekly comic commentary, to be cancelled. Wearing suffragette white, Ms. B explored her use of the C word in a recent episode, noting discussion that maybe women are trying to reclaim it, but maybe it needs not to be reclaimed, that women have heard that word, some of them at the worst moments in their lives, and maybe you take its power away by not using it. As she said, her use of the C word in response to a tone-deaf Instagram post by Ivanka Trump distracted from the plight of immigrant children being separated from their parents at the border, and she was sorry to have contributed to that deflection. Ultimately, lots of people say lots of things on television regulated to different extents in different contexts by the FCC, and yeah, there's lots of stuff I'd prefer got taken off the air like 24-hour propaganda machines, but yay, freedom of speech, so yeah. Heading into this week's showdown finale of Legion, it looks like something pretty significant is brewing. David's plans to keep Shadow King Amal Farouk from reuniting with his body crumpled in front of him, though there were certainly some intriguing visuals to contend with along the way, including Amber Midthunder as Carrie defeating wave after wave of bolo-wielding ninjas, and Aubrey Plaza as Lenny with a big-ass gun. Jean Smart as Melanie, revealed to be in Farouk's thrall, torments Sid with images of David designed to seed doubts in her mind. Speaking of mind-blowing, a minotaur we'd otherwise encountered in Melanie's mind as a shambling zombie burst into new life and would seem to have joined us in this reality, wreaking havoc on the team just as Farouk joins his body, reasserts his physical presence in this world, and David, fresh from an entire episode spent torturing Oliver, confronts him with one word. Boo. I don't know what's going to happen, which is why I will absolutely be tuning in to find out. FX has announced Legion will be picked up for a third season, so after the first season disentangling David from the Shadow King, and this season trying to keep him away from his body and going very dark in the process, maybe next season will be spent figuring out how to contend with his own madness, entirely independent from what the Shadow King was up to. I guess we'll find out. I started watching season 13 of Supernatural, and I'm reasonably pleased with what I've seen so far. My DVR failed to record the fourth episode, Patience, which I think is going to hurt continuity, so I'm planning to track that one down and stream it. But otherwise, Sam and Dean are coming to terms with Jack as a Nephilim, at this point fully grown, who is the offspring of an archangel, Lucifer, and a human, Kelly Klein, who died in childbirth at the end of season 12. They've teamed up with a prophet to confront a prince of hell, an archdemon, if you will, this one Asmodeus, who, among other things, is able to shapeshift, so that should make for some fun storytelling as we go. I noticed the tiniest bit of foreshadowing when Jack was enjoying a few moments of Scooby-Doo before Dean told him to turn it off. Still so very much looking forward to that episode. I think Season 13 got off to a great start. I don't know exactly where it's going yet, and Castiel stuck in the darkness for a bit seemed a little off the mark, but a good opportunity for giving him a bit of exploration, so yeah, generally I'm enjoying it. And with that, thanks for checking in on my video cataloging project. You can check out my catalog listing along with audio links at VideoFuzzy.blogspot.com and past episodes of this podcast at Apple Podcasts and iTunes at VideoFuzzy.libsyn.com. Feedback is always appreciated. You can contact me through my blog or podcast sites or through my VideoFuzzy page on Facebook, or you can follow me at TJVideoFuzzy on Twitter. For VideoFuzzy, I'm Terry J. Aman. Happy viewing.
It might be amazing, it might just be scuzzy. We'll find out together on VideoFuzzy.